culture has a name for it. We call them imaginary friends.
We got a bear. This is the embodiment of evil. How the hell did that happen, my friend?
Look at that, though. See my monitor?
Yeah, I do. Wait, no. Oh, shoot. Yes. Oh, my God. I got to get my glasses on. Wait, hold on. I need to see this.
That is the hero bear. This is the bear from the movie.
That's the bear? Oh,
Yeah.
sweet.
So we built 4, actually. So we built 2 floppies. We built a puppet, and we built a posable, and this is the posable. And what's been kind of making me crazy about all the ones they've been giving away, or even the animatronic one they built just for the junket.
Yeah.
It doesn't really look like the real thing. Like the real thing has this asymmetry. Like, see how his eyes are way off?
Yeah.
His ears are way off, even though his muzzle is straight up and down. None of the marketing department, they've done an amazing job. I have nothing but fantastic things to say, but no one has really gotten the bear exactly right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, this reminds me of something I had as a kid. My God. I didn't abandon him, though. I did not abandon that bear.
You're not? Well, good. No. Maybe then he's not coming for you, at least.
I mean, dude, how you look at that, like, we've seen Child's Play, we've seen Annabelle, we've seen these creations, these childhood terrors brought to life. I mean, I was, when I was a kid, I'm old enough to remember Trilogy of Terror, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it, why a bear? Why a bear?
Why not a bear? I mean, you know, they've done almost everything. You know, it's the challenge in big commercial filmmaking, you know, which is a very different discipline, obviously, than indie filmmaking, is you want to give the audience the same but different, right? It needs to be familiar but surprising. So how do you strike that balance? It's actually very tricky. And you know, there's this subgenre of haunted toys, of possessed dolls and puppets and things like that, and there just had never been a teddy bear one that I'm aware of, and so it seemed like a perfect opportunity.
I like it. Okay, so look, I've been, you know, I've known of you for quite a long time. I've known of your career quite a long time. I remember even, you know, I didn't realize before Cry Wolf, you were an actor. You were trying to do some acting. Why? How did you get into directing?
Well, I always wanted to be a director. I majored in film undergrad at Dartmouth. I got my master's degree from USC. Directing was always the plan, but you know, I grew up before digital video, so I had an analog video camera. But if you were interested in storytelling and connecting with an audience specifically, when there was like no YouTube, the only way you could connect with an audience was to do theater. And so I lived in a small town in Virginia, and I was a theater nerd. I went to theater camp. I did, 2 or 3 plays a year. It was just your only real opportunity. I mean, I also like dabbled in public access TV. I hosted a comic book show, but you really, if you wanted to connect with an audience, and that's really what I'm about. I'm not really just about making movies. I'm about connecting with audiences through the story, right? So we're telling a story that they then make meaning when they perceive that story through the filter of their own experience. So the end product is really the meaning the audience makes when they see your movie. So the movie is not the final step. I openly acknowledge that the audience is a part of my process, and my end product isn't achieved until they see the movie and have an experience. So that's what I'm really all about. And because I have this history as acting in theater, you're 21, 22-year-old guy. People keep telling you your chin looks like a Superman chin, and J.J. Abrams is casting the Superman movie that he never got to make. I'm sorry, Brett Ratner is casting the J.J. Abrams script that he never got to make. And they're seeing unknowns. Of course, you're gonna go in and read for that. Like, why wouldn't you? And I had a little, not even success. I got on a few radars. It never really went anywhere. Ultimately, I knew where I was going with my career, and as soon as I realized I needed to just go all in on directing, that's what I did.
I do see you as Superman. Now that you said it, I get that. Horror is such a, I think you can probably tell I'm a horror fan.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're a pretty good horror fan yourself.
I'm a bigger fan than my office would lead you to believe. I just moved into this room in my house I moved my office from one room to another because I'm doing some construction, and I have nothing up yet. So I promise I'm a much bigger fan than it appears.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I won't judge you for your lack of, because I know you. I know I mean, we've talked in the past before, but why horror? What is it about that genre, and what was your introduction?
Ooh, well, let me answer that in reverse. The first horror movie I remember seeing was Poltergeist in 1982. I was 6 years old, and it ruined me. I was like a normal, sweet kid before I saw that movie, and I had brutal night terrors for the next like 20 years. Not quite that long, but it definitely changed my psychological makeup. Uh, and after that, I'd say the next horror movie that really impacted me, it's probably it's a close tie between like Jaws and Aliens. I definitely respond to sort of the subgenres of horror, like horror adventure, which I would say Jaws is, or
For sure.
action horror, which is really what Aliens is at the end of the day. I've never had the biggest affinity for like super gratuitous, in your face like gore. Like I prefer more of the kind of horror that is almost Hitchcockian, that plays a game with the audience. Like that's kind of my bread and butter. And that's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to the genre, because first of all, it's one of the few areas in big Hollywood filmmaking where you can still take risks, where you can try to be ambitious because you have smaller budgets and you're not beholden to a million masters. That's why I love working with Jason Blum, because it just lets me do what I do. And I love, playing the game with the audience. I love constructing scare sequences, and I like creating an active viewing experience for the audience, and horror is a perfect genre to do that with.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Blum, working with Jason Blum, because you do. I mean, you've worked quite a bit with him. Why is it such a good pairing for you as a filmmaker? Obviously, they're taking chances, but what else is there? Because it's Blumhouse has gotten huge. We've seen. It's amazing how big they've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with Blumhouse, and I think they've gotten big because they're successful, and they're successful for a reason. It's not luck, right? It's not like they had one hit movie and they got some deal from a studio. I mean, they create hit after hit after hit. And that's because Jason is a real producer, like a real producer, in the sense of like David O. Selznick or Irving Thalberg. Like, he understands the job, and that is to find a piece of material, bring artists together, give them the resources they need to execute, give them the control to achieve their goals. And then when the movie is done, try to help make it better, and then take it into the studio and fight like hell to get it the best release possible. That is the producer's job, right? It's really not their job to like pick the color of the sneakers that the main character is wearing. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we are in our industry now. Like, a lot of executives and producers, I think, want to be directors. And by the way, I'm not saying they have bad ideas. A lot of them would be great directors, but they should just be directors. Like, why hire a director and then like do the job for them? It's no different than me hiring an actor and just giving them line readings. Like, you're not letting them do their job. And Jason is a real producer, and he understands what it means to do that job.
That's it. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. It makes sense, because you see some of look. Horror is such an interesting thing, and you said it yourself, there's so much originality in it, because you're not spending 250 million on one film. You're spending very little on a film with maybe minor stars, maybe bigger stars, but it's not that expensive, and it's generally horror has been thriving the past few years.
Yeah, because you can take creative risks, and this is a creative industry, and risk, if there's no risk, there's no reward. That cliche exists for a reason.
How do you deal with because as we're praising horror, man, we love it all, but there's a lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of critical. I mean, like, I remember, as a slasher kid, I loved slasher movies, and I would see something like, I don't know, Final Exam or The Boogans, one of my favorite movies. I'm sorry, it is. The reviews are trash. This is a horrible. This is just Nixie. How do you deal with the negative side of fandom, the negative side of criticism?
the negative side of fandom, you know, you got to take the good with the bad in life. I try to think about what my granny used to say, which is hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and be happy with what you get. You know, who wouldn't love to be adored by everyone? But that's, you can hope for that, but you ain't gonna get it. So I love the fans. I like passionate fans. You know, if you passionately hate my movie, I actually would take that over you never having heard of my movie.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Well, I think that one of the things I've noticed with your work, and you even said it yourself, you like things that are more of a mystery and not in your face horror, which I think that makes sense. I mean, I look back at Cry Wolf, which was a slasher, but also had that kind of, thriller-esque attitude.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, it just comes back to what role is the audience playing in the experience. Are they passive or are they active? I think a horror thriller, invites them into the game that you're playing with the story. A pure, straight up horror movie is a much more visceral, passive experience. And it's not binary. There's like, you can have all sorts of shades of gray in between. But I definitely gravitate more towards the active experience. And I guess you could label that more thriller than horror, but I mean, we could debate this all day long.
I just think, I always think that's a silly argument. Like, it's, you know, like the Silence of the Lambs is not a horror movie. Jaws is not a horror movie. It had, you know, a woman gets eaten by a shark really brutally. That's a horror thing. That's horror. You know, Silence of the Lambs, he eats people. That's a horror thing. You know, I think it's kind of ridiculous that we have to label everything specifically. It's just, horror is huge. There's a lot of horror out there, you know?
Yeah, I was Googling around trying to arm myself with the technical definitions at one point, and they're all over the place, obviously. But I saw one that kind of resonated with me, which was that thrillers are ultimately about something you can explain, where horror movies often have some aspect of an unexplainable evil present in the narrative. And that sort of true fear of something that you can never really know because it's so evil and so outside of the normal empathetic human existence is what dips it into the horror space.
Nice. Now we are talking about the movie here too. I want to, you know, obviously we talked about a little bit about the junket, but what's it like to kind of build? I love that you mentioned that your first horror movie was Poltergeist, because that feels really fitting, especially with this film.
Yes.
Was that an influence? Do you find influences in movies like that when you write something? Or
absolutely. Every time I make a movie, I identify touchstones in pre-production for, I mean, look, the clown doll and Poltergeist certainly was a precursor of my fascination with scary dolls and scary toys. I think every movie I've ever made, I've always identified a handful of touchstones for my department heads. And what I do, I make sure there's a TV in my office, and I just keep those movies on a loop with the sound down. So even during our meetings, they're just like playing, and the framing, the faces, the editing patterns, they start to affect you on a subconscious level when you just have them on a loop. And I have different tiers, like, and sometimes they're touchstones for different reasons. Like Cry Wolf, believe it or not, Joe Carnahan's Narc is actually a major touchstone for Cry Wolf. Not from a tonal standpoint or a narrative standpoint, just the way he shot it and the way he was using color and sort of this sort of almost kind of like a 70s kind of style of paranoid filmmaking, right? Like it had a major influence on Cry Wolf. Although I did have a producer on that project. It was my first movie. He said, "Don't tell people your touchstones are movies that didn't make a lot of money." And that stuck with me. On this movie, the top tier touchstones, like obviously there's long lists of movies that had different references for us, but the top tier, the two I always talked about were Poltergeist and Pan's Labyrinth.
Hell yeah. Okay, I get that. Absolutely. Pan's Labyrinth is, I mean, nobody does it better than Del Toro. Let's be real. It's funny to me that because that movie is, again, horror movie proves that it can be about a lot of things. There's a lot of, when you approach a script, when you're writing something like this, where you could have easily gone the typical, yeah, it's a killer toy, he's going, I'm gonna jump at you. You didn't go that route. And I'm not going to spoil anything because I don't want to do that, even though a lot of people will have seen it already. But how do you go into a script? How do you, when you how much do you go into the backstory? How much you kind of fill in the blanks, I guess, that this isn't going to be on screen, but I need to know this for me as a filmmaker and I'm going to direct these people.
Yeah, well, first I want to address the sort of the killer toy of it all. Even though this is not a spoiler, I do want people to remember, if they haven't seen the movie yet, our teddy bear his name is Chauncey. The movie is not called Chauncey, right? It's just like Chucky, Annabelle, Megan. We are not called Chauncey. We are called Imaginary, which I hope is a cue to the audience that our movie is bigger than just the haunted toy gimmick, right? Like that is, yes, it's a big part of our film, but there's a lot more going on. And I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
But back to your question, which was,
simply that, how do you approach a screenplay? How do you
yes
build a screenplay? And that, like,
right,
that.
how many questions do I answer that are not necessarily on screen? I mean, a lot. You got to be able to back up your choices quickly, especially on the day when you're talking to actors and you're talking to members of your crew, and things have to be happening quickly. It might feel like everything's moving slowly to the lay person visiting the set, but for me, who's at the nexus of every decision, everything that's happening, it's like boom, 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 boom for like 12 hours, right, a day of just making decisions. So I got to know my stuff forward and backwards.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't really believe in the auteur theory. Like, I believe in collaborative art. So the movie is not what was in my brain on screen. It's not even close. I think my favorite movies are way more complex and multi-layered and nuanced than I think any one person could really just imagine on their own. So I think of myself more as almost like a conductor, maybe, or that's not great. Somewhere between a conductor and an architect, where it's like, yes, I'm coming up with a plan, and yes, I'm kind of like moving people and at the right times and bringing them together. But man, they got to play those instruments, and I'm expecting them to do something a little bit different or offer a different flavor, surprise me. The actors who I cast are always the actors who come in and surprise me and do something that I didn't expect. Like, that's what I want, because I'm the first fan, right? I'm the first audience for my movies. That's how I view the role of the director. Like, I'm the first audience. And when there's a shot that's like where everything's comes together, the camera moves at the right time, the actor turns at the right time, the key light hits their eye just as the tear is building, and I can imagine the music in my head swelling. I'm like, boom, that's in the movie. I just saw a moment from the movie that we're making, and it happened right now here on set. And I get incredibly excited, and everyone on the crew can feel it. The cast can feel it. I actually say cut differently when it happens. I go, God, and everyone like knows that that's a good sign that we're moving on. And so I don't have it like all in my head. I want people to fill in the blanks. Like, if they don't fill in the blanks, I feel like they're not doing their job, and we're doing filmmaking as collaborative art a disservice.
Well, I love that. That's actually something I really admire about you. I appreciate about you is that every single time I do a junket or I interview people that have worked with you on one of your films, whether it's Fantasy Island, Truth or Dare, even I didn't do Cry Wolf, but they all say, he's the best. He's so collaborative. He makes me feel important. And I think that's really important in this day and age, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky balance. Like, you don't want to be kind of like a wet blanket. Like, you don't want to be like, yeah, whatever you want to do is cool with me. I mean, we're on the clock, and every second counts. Like, each shooting day to me is almost like game day. In a weird way, when we're shooting, I almost feel that my job is like being the head coach of like I'm not a big sports person. I'm going to be honest, so I'm probably going to mess up some of these metaphors.
Fair enough.
But I kind of feel like I'm the head coach of an NFL team, right? And the lead actor is the quarterback. At the end of the day, they got to throw the ball. I can't throw the ball for them, right? but I have, you know, all these players and this staff, and I've got like the team owners, you know, who are watching me and making sure, but I've got to call the plays that we're going to do. I got to make sure everyone's doing their job, and I got to win. And winning means making an exciting movie and getting it and squeezing every bit of creativity out of the day. And so I mean, I lead with strength for sure. Like no one will walk on my set and say, wait, who's the director? Like you know that I'm the director. I'm charging forward, but I always try to do it with empathy and grace and a spirit of collaboration.
That's nice. I like that. And it is impressive, man. It is impressive to have, and you can kind of tell when it's bullshit. You know, you can see when someone's, oh yeah, it was so great to work with him. He was so wonderful. Yeah, it was. And then you're like, yeah, that sucked. That was a work.
Yeah.
But
they got that like a hostage kind of look on their face.
What is that, syndrome or whatever? They're like, I have to like this.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome or whatever.
Stockholm syndrome. That's it. I was thinking the other way. So I want to ask. You know, you had mentioned there were moments that you yelled, you get excited. What are some of the moments from Imaginary that you felt that you got to see and that you're like, hell yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
That you can talk about, by the way.
Yeah. Listen, I have a theory about filmmaking, which is it's my job as a director to make sure there are 2 great movie moments each day. Like, and I try to average one before lunch and one after lunch. And if I'm shooting for, 30 days, let's say, that's 60 great moments, right? So if it's a 90-minute movie, I'm almost getting, what is that? One every like 2 minutes or a minute and a half, basically. And if you can do that, then you're gonna have an okay movie. Like, at least it's gonna be a good movie, right? It's not gonna be a pile of shit. And so it's hard for me to pick just like 1 or 2 because I'm really trying to get like 2 a day. But I would say the ones that kind of stick out in my mind, they usually fall into 1 or 2 categories: either a performance beat or like a sort of a technical sequence type beat where everything kind of comes together. I would say from a performance standpoint, DeWanda, that speech DeWanda gives when she's on the bed talking to Alice, and then we find out something surprising. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I mean, her performance was so emotional and present, and it was really kind of a surreal scene, but she grounds it so beautifully, and you're so invested in the story she's telling. It was a wonderful moment. I remember feeling that on set, and so it's quite a long take. Like, we don't really cut much in that, so it's a pure performance beat. But I'd also say there's this, I was trying to play with changing the laws of gravity when you come in and out of certain worlds in our movie. And I certainly didn't have the Inception budget to do it, so I had to kind of figure out some low budget DIY ways to do that. And when those elements started to come together, and I started to really see, oh, that's gonna work. It's gonna look cool, and I was able to do it in kind of like a student film sort of way. That was pretty exciting too.
That's really cool. And dude, I really want to thank you for taking the time out to talk more about the movie, because I just think I've met you before again, and you're just such a pleasant person to talk to, and I feel like the advertising for this alone is going to sell the fucking movie. Like, it's smart advertising.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for saying that. That really means a lot to me. I'm not the most sort of like forward-facing filmmaker. Like, I don't spend a ton of time on social media, and I'm not trying to be famous, but I love talking to film fans about movies, and we've talked a couple times now, and to have you say that, it means a lot to me. It really does. So thank you. And as far as what was the other thing? Sorry, I'm a little overwhelmed with the release. The marketing. Yes. Normally I'm not this slow, everyone. But the movie's coming out tomorrow, and I'm actually beside myself a little bit with anxiety.
I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, the marketing has been incredible. Again, I view marketing as a part of the storytelling experience for the audience. It's what gets the butts in the seats. So the marketing needs to be in line with the movie. The marketing is making a promise that the movie's got to deliver on. So if those aren't working well together, you got a problem. And that has happened to me before in my career. And I'm so glad that we're on the same page right now. And by the way, I almost said I'm so glad they got it right. The truth is, even when the marketing and the movie don't line up, it's not that they got it wrong. It's just they're making a promise that the movie doesn't deliver.
Yeah.
And they're almost trying to like trick the audience into showing up. But I love it when the marketing sets up the movie, doesn't give everything away, and makes a promise that we can deliver on. And I feel like they've done that. They're doing it in a really creative way. Adam Fogelson, who's the chairman of Lionsgate, came up through marketing. He understands the story. He understands the storytelling aspects of marketing better than anyone else in Hollywood. And I'm just thrilled with the result.
Well, I'm thrilled about this bear. I love this bear. And Jeff, thank you so much.
You were always playing with your imaginary friend. When the connection was severed, the entity becomes enraged.
He says he's right behind you.
But it was just my imagination.